So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deirdre Dunn from Health and Wellbeing, and you're very welcome to the second talk in our Menopause Awareness series organised by the Southeast Community Healthcare Menopause Awareness Working Group. Just some housekeeping pieces, if that's okay, before we start. If you could please ensure that you're on mute, and if there are any issues with the connectivity during the seminar, that you might turn off your video if it's on. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available after today, which will be great. If you've any questions during the presentation, please add them into the chat and they will be answered later on by Catherine. So I'm delighted to welcome Catherine O'Keefe today. Catherine is a menopause workplace consultant from Kilkenny, originally living in Dublin, founder of Wellness Warrior and creator of the Menopause Success Summit. She is author of the bestseller, All You Need to Know About Menopause, which you might have seen in your local bookshop. And she helps organizations implement a comprehensive menopause strategy that leads to meaningful change. And she's helped hundreds of companies choose support over silence. Catherine is on a mission to shatter the menopause taboo for good. So, Catherine, we're absolutely delighted to have you here today, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Deirdre. And it's lovely to be with everyone today. And we're probably talking about a subsection of menopause that I have to say is probably one of my favorite topics of menopause, and that is around the psychological aspects and your mental health. And to start, I just like to share a story with you. And this is a story about Lucy. At the age of 43, 44, Lucy was outgoing. She was sociable, she was bubbly, great relationships, felt she was very kind of gregarious at work, very confident in her job. That was when she was 43, 44. As years went on, very subtly, Lucy felt she started to change. But it was only when she got to about 48, 49 that it all kind of came to a culmination. And the subtleties of the psychological changes that can happen in menopause are what can really catch many people unaware. For Lucy, she actually stopped going to social gatherings, to events. She stopped even going for, and this is kind of, before, during, and after COVID, but she stopped kind of going for coffees, going for lunch, going to outings. She preferred to just stay home in her PJs, relax. She was going to bed a lot earlier. She was very tired. And then she found that her sleep was being impacted. And that had a knock on impact in terms of how she felt during the day. And that resulted in her memory wasn't as good as it used to be. She felt her concentration was off. And that impacted her in the job that she was doing. And on several occasions, just in her daily tasks, she found that she forgot everyday information that would have readily come to come to her mouth or her awareness in the past. And that really impacted her confidence and her self-esteem. And that had a knock-on impact on her anxiety. So all of a sudden, it kind of picked up pace. What had been happening gradually from when she was about 43, 44 started to really ramp up when she got to 49. Her confidence was impacted. She wasn't sociable. She wasn't going out with her friends. She wasn't even going out with her family. Going out for a family meal, it was much more, oh no, can we just cook at home? I prefer to stay at home. And it was so subtle over time that she really didn't notice it. And it was only when one of her friends said to her, I'm worried about you, in relation to, she was able to say, listen, I have seen changes in how you are, in terms of how you've been over the last, it had exasperated over the months prior, but certainly over the last couple of years. And this is where the psychological aspects of menopause are so important. That story I'm telling you, that's a story of just one woman. But I could tell you the majority of women going through menopause will share similarities to Lucy's story in their own individual personal situations. When we look at menopause, I always say it's like the iceberg analogy, because we think of hot flushes, we think of night sweats, we even think now of brain fog, but that's the surface. There's so much more happening beneath the surface that's really important to understand, particularly when we come to looking at how can we support our mental health for ourselves, or be it a friend or a partner that might be going through menopause. So, just to take a little step back, and I know there's some bits of what I'm just going to talk about that you might have heard before, but I just want to set the scene coming at this from a mental health and psychological perspective. If we look at the hormones of menopause, I just ask you in the chat box, what are the key hormones you think of when you think about menopause? If you just want to type them into the chat box. The understanding the sequence of events in terms of what happens to the body, not only how that impacts us physically, but how it impacts us emotionally, is very important. So estrogen, yeah, estrogen, I always kind of say reduction of estrogen. Estrogen is the one we hear about a lot, but there's the other ones that are just as important. So we have estrogen, we've progesterone, and we have testosterone. So, just very briefly, and to give you some insight into the red box, and this is very important. But before I do that, let's start with these three. Progesterone, the calming, nurturing hormone. I always think about Michelle Obama. I love to equate the hormones to people. Michelle Obama is very calm. She's just very kind of calm, controlled, centered. That's progesterone. Progesterone, the calming, nurturing hormone. But progesterone is the one for many women that tends to decline in those early perimenopause years. And it's that decline that starts to have a knock on impact on the psychological aspects of menopause. And then we have estrogen. So, estrogen is the vitality. That's the Beyonce, that's the Taylor Swift. That is the vitality that comes with menopause. And estrogen impacts from the body, top of the head, right down to your toe. So, its impact is far reaching. So, as estrogen starts to not only decline, but fluctuate massively as you go through the menopause timeline, that will have a knock on impact both on the physical and the psychological symptoms of menopause. And then testosterone. Testosterone is equally as important to women as it is to men, and it's really important that we remember that, because we often think that it's the male hormone, but it's very important for women. So a testosterone decline will impact libido, is clinically the big picture that we see when it comes to testosterone decline. But anecdotally, many women would say that it can also impact in relation again to energy, which will all feed into the physical and mental state of how a person is feeling as they go through menopause. So, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone are the key hormones that are changing. But the most important aspect when we come to looking after our mental health in these years is this one, and that is cortisol. So the fight or flight hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, are fantastic when we're in danger. If there's a car, out of control car, if it's a lion chasing us, whatever it is, then our body needs adrenaline, and it needs that so we can run faster, our lungs, we breathe faster, everything heightens up. However, if we're in an ongoing state of chronic stress, it means that our body is then producing excess amounts of cortisol. Now, don't get me wrong, cortisol is really important. It's cortisol that allows me to stand up here today and talk to you. We all need cortisol to do our job every day, to get through our to-do list. However, when the body is producing too much cortisol, it wreaks havoc on many of the symptoms of menopause. But not only that, we have a very intricate relationship called the pregnenolone steal. And what that means is when the body, the adrenal glands are producing cortisol, it's being told, you're in a perceived threat. And just to mention, those perceived threats can be very different for all of us. It could be technology, it could be environmental, it could be the traffic, it could be anything. But when the body is signaling that you need to produce more cortisol, and all of a sudden the body's looking for, okay, I've maxed out my production. Where else can I get it from? So what it does then, I mean, the human body is so clever. So what it does then, it robs from progesterone, and that is the pregnenolone steal. So what the body now says is it says, okay, steal progesterone, convert it into cortisol and more stress hormones. So remember, these are already declining and fluctuating. Now, if you've got ongoing stress, progesterone is impacted further. So it's just really important to just be mindful of how important to understand the impact of stress is when it comes to menopause, and all symptoms of menopause, but particularly the psychological. So when we look at that, I'm not going to go through the menopause timeline because hopefully you've got that from your previous talk. But if not, we can certainly go through it later when we do the Q&A. So when we look then at the fluctuating hormones, what's the impact on the body? Before we even look at the psychological impact, what's important to remember is that we know 20 to 25% of women will go through menopause with no symptoms, or the symptoms are so mild they don't even notice. And I know they're extremely lucky. I will tell you, I've met many of them. So we do know there are women who go through with no symptoms. But conversely, we do know, on the other hand, we know that 25% of women will suffer severely as they go through menopause, with that remainder, 50%, being in the mild to moderate category. So it's not a foregone conclusion that you're going to experience symptoms. And then what's really important to remember is that menopause is so individual. No two people on the planet will have the same experience of menopause. So really important to understand that as well, because we'll all experience different symptoms. So when we look at the psychological, I'm going to show you a slide in a minute, but before I do that, I want to just talk about the top 5 symptoms that women report as impacting, particularly in the workplace, but life in general. And again, I just ask you in the chat box, what do you think? What could be the top 5 symptoms? If you just like to type it in there, and let's just look at those for a few minutes before we delve into the psychological. Sleeplessness, hot flushes, aching joints, brilliant, anxiety, sleep, mood swings, lack of sleep, anxiety, fantastic, rage, brain fog, forgetfulness, brain fog, hot flushes, amnesia, sleeplessness, loss of confidence, body aches, sleep issues, night sweats, brain fog, irritable, tiredness. Tiredness is massive. Joint pain, atrophy, so that would be vaginal atrophy, forgetfulness, sleeplessness, anxiety, hot flushes, brain fog, tiredness. Fantastic. You're hitting a lot of symptoms here: facial hair, memory loss, muscle pains, temperature regulation, fatigue, brain fog, forgetfulness, putting on weight too easily. That is a big one as well. But the top 5, I did a survey in 2021 with hundreds of women across Ireland, and the top 5, you've all hit one of them, which was brain fog. Brain fog. That was number 1, was brain fog. Number 2 was anxiety, which many of you have stated there as well. Number 3 was loss of confidence, and I think I saw that in there as well. I'll just abbreviate it. Number 4 was sleep issues, so like insomnia. And number 5 was aches and pains. Quite a few of you put in muscle pain, aches and pains. That was number 5. What's interesting, I think number 6 was hot flushes, and tiredness. Tiredness really fits into all of these, because the exhaustion and tiredness of menopause will impact all of these symptoms. But what is interesting is, if you look at these top 5 symptoms: brain fog, anxiety, impact on confidence, sleep issues, those 4 are psychological. So we know so many women will say to me they will take a hot flush any day over the psychological symptoms of menopause. And personally, I would 100% have to agree with that. And that's why understanding the psychological aspects is so important, because there is so much happening. If we look, and I'm going to show you a slide as I mentioned in a minute, if we look at brain fog on its own, we think of forgetfulness, we think of memory issues, we think of decision making. But there's much more to brain fog. Brain fog also encompasses spatial awareness. So it might be you bump into doors more. It can also be if you're trying to park a car, your vision, your spatial awareness is very different. Brain fog can also include executive functioning, and there you're coming into problem solving and decision making. So all of a sudden, even a simple thing like, what are you going to cook for dinner tonight? What am I going to wear today? That feels like a momentous task. Whereas before, it mightn't have felt like that at all. So there's actually 7 layers to brain fog. So that's why the psychological is so, so important. So I'm just going to share a slide with you now, and I'm just going to talk you through some of the key psychological symptoms of menopause. And hopefully everyone can see this okay. So if you look here, so these are the common symptoms of menopause. Now I say common because it's not all of them. This is just kind of the main ones that we talk about. But just look at the psychological. Look at how many symptoms, and this isn't even all of them, but look at how many symptoms that are here and the impact this has on your working day, but also on your life in general. So when we look at it, we talked about brain fog. And you're introduced to someone 2 seconds later, you totally forget the name. That, particularly in work where you forget information, that can really impact your confidence, which has a knock-on impact on your self-esteem and how you feel about yourself. And we must not underestimate that. I see that every day in workplaces, how that impacts women. And it's very, very challenging. We also know sleep is impacted, as I said, and it can be just because of psychological issues, or it may be impacted because of night sweats. It can also be impacted because of vaginal dryness, which for many women can actually feel more hot. It can feel more bothersome at night time. And then when we look at anxiety, and there's different forms of anxiety. The most common forms of anxiety in menopause would be social anxiety. So if we go back to Lucy's story earlier, she experienced a lot of social anxiety. It can also be health anxiety. And that's a really difficult one, because if you've got symptoms of menopause, how do you differentiate between what's menopause and what maybe is there something else going on? And that's why I'm a huge believer in having an annual checkup with your doctor, just to rule out everything, because I don't believe in worrying, when you don't know what the story is. I much prefer, if you think there's something wrong, get it looked at, get it checked out, and then you can stop worrying about it. And then generalized anxiety disorder. And included here too would be panic attacks. 1 in 4 women may experience panic attacks at some stage as they go through menopause. But what I'd like to just mention in relation to panic attacks, and somebody mentioned the thyroid in the comments box earlier, is the symptoms of menopause can also look quite similar to other underlying conditions. And the two that really jump out and can often be, particularly for women in the earlier years, can be the thyroid or being low in iron, being anemic. So if we look at a panic attack or palpitations, they are also symptoms of an imbalance in the thyroid. They're also symptoms of being low in iron. So it's very important to just, as I said, keep on top of your health and be proactive. Memory comes under brain fog, the concentration, etc. And then the mood changes. It's like with Lucy, she was very outgoing. And it was only when her friends sat down with her and talked to her that she really realized she wasn't herself. She didn't feel like herself. And actually, she hadn't felt like herself for probably 1 to 2 years. That's a long time to just let your life slip by. And that's why I personally feel it's so important that we understand the symptoms of menopause, because then you can look at, well, what can I do? How can I support myself? We'll be going through that shortly. And remember too, with the mood changes, it can be low moods, it can be the rage. The rage of menopause is real. And it's very important we acknowledge that. That rage can stem from many different places, many different reasons. It can be from frustration, it can be from stress, it can be from exhaustion, lack of sleep, etc. It can be from worry and anxiety. But it's very important to acknowledge what's happening in our bodies and acknowledge that our bodies are changing because our hormones are declining and fluctuating. And it's not a quick change. It doesn't happen quickly. As you know, it takes many years. But understanding and allowing for the mood changes is very important, and the irritability that can come into play. I always kind of say, I have three boys, and they're all kind of now puberty, teenagers, etc. And when we look at menopause is reverse puberty. So we're very kind to our teenagers. We always kind of give them a get out of jail card. It's like, oh, listen, they're going through puberty. It's tough, it's hard on them, the skin, etc. Menopause is the same, except instead of the hormones going up, the hormones are fluctuating and declining. And that causes great flux in the body. So we have great fun at home. If I'm having a bad moment and I'm getting cross or whatever, I'll always say to the lads, listen, you're in puberty, I'm in menopause. We're opposite sides of the roller coaster, and it is a roller coaster, but for different reasons. So it's really important to understand that, because just give yourself some slack. Just be kind, be gentle, be understanding of what your body is going through. Also, there is an impact in relation to libido, and that can be because of how you're feeling. If you're having hot flushes, night sweats, if you're not sleeping, you're not going to have a balanced sexual appetite, and libido is impacted as well. And then also loneliness and that disconnected state. So many women have told me over the years I've been working in this space how they've gone through different periods of utter loneliness as they went through menopause. I've seen that in so many instances. And I think that's where the work that we're now doing and the awareness that's now out there is so important, because none of us are alone and everybody needs support going through menopause. Support at work, support at home, support in the community. It's so, so important. So, you are not alone. Everyone will have some experience of menopause as you go through these transitions. And then the exhaustion and tiredness, as I mentioned, overwhelm as well, where literally, it's like things that might have been easy to deal with before now just become more challenging, or you just can't deal with it. So that impacts your bounce back ability, your resilience is impacted, where you just maybe don't bounce back from things as much as you might have done before. So you can see the psychological is quite far reaching in terms of its impact. And I'm just going to stop the share there. So another important aspect of psychological just to be aware of, and I'm not going to delve into this too much, but it's very important to remember. We're looking at psychological symptoms there, and these are the symptoms that the body is going to express. What we must also acknowledge is that menopause is a time of great change. Human beings, we don't like change. We're resistant to change. But this is a change that is going to happen. We cannot stop it, and we can't skirt it or avoid it. But one aspect of that change that can further challenge the process is past trauma. So if a person has experienced a trauma at any stage in their life and it hasn't been resolved through the body, working with a trauma therapist, a specialist is very important. It's a specialist in that area. It can be that past trauma comes back up very viscerally as you go through menopause. Now, two important points to note on this. First, a trauma will be very different for everybody. I met one woman who had an incident when she was very, very young with ants, where she fell into, I think it was like an ant hill or something. And she ended up, she was very young. I think she was only like 7 or 8, but she ended up with loads of ants crawling on her hand. And that came back to her very, very raw when she was in menopause. I have worked with many other women where unfortunately it may be due to a trauma which has been due to various forms of abuse at different years, at different stages in their lives. So trauma can differ for everybody. It could be an accident, etc. The most important part is that if a person is experiencing past trauma resurging in menopause, they must get specialist support and work with a specialist trauma therapist. Because what you do not want to do is you don't want a person to re experience that trauma. You want to help that person process it and work through it, and that is vitally important. There's a lot of work being done in this area. There's a brilliant book, The Body Keeps Score, is one that's excellent to read if you're interested in delving into more of it. But the most important thing is be aware of it. I have met hundreds of women who have been shocked with how trauma that they thought they had processed, that they worked through, has come back so viscerally in the menopause years. So just important to be aware of that one as well. And before we move on now to, the practical of what you can do, another aspect to be aware of. Here's a nice example for you. If we take brain fog impacts executive functioning. It impacts our speed of messaging traveling to the brain. So it could be you could be talking to your partner, you could be talking to a friend, you could be with a group of friends. Somebody might pass a joke, but it might take a few minutes for it to actually land with you. So it might be that your sense of humor isn't as sharp or quick or as it was before. And that might result in your partner might turn around and say, God, it just, where's your sense of humor gone? You didn't, you don't laugh at things as much as you did before. And that can impact relationships. But another way it can impact is that the forgetfulness. So it might be that, I told you, to pick up one of the kids or to collect something from the chemist or to do something in the shops that you might think in your head you've told your partner, but actually you may never have communicated that. And that can lead to tension because your partner might be like, you did not tell me. And you're like, no, 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 I'm 100% convinced I did. Because in your head, you might think you relayed that information, but actually you didn't. So that's just from brain fog alone. But if we start looking at all the other aspects of menopause, there is an impact on relationships. And that can be your intimate relationships, all your relationships. It can be with if you have family, with your children, siblings, and your friends. So it's really important that we're aware of that as well and just making sure that we have support. Because once you start opening up and talk about what you're experiencing and how you're feeling, then people can help you and support you. And that is very, very important. Because when we look at menopause, it's important to remember menopause does not just impact the person going through it, it's all the touch points in that person's life. So at work, it's your work colleagues, your manager, etc. At home, it's the family unit or in the community. So if we look at those symptoms of menopause and we concentrate, much of what I'm going to say here would apply to many of the symptoms of menopause, but we're concentrating to focus on the psychological symptoms. So if we look at this now, how can I support myself every day? How can I look after my mental health? Well, the first place is we look at what I call the nutrient robbers. And these are what are those aspects in your life that can put an additional toll on your mental health. So again, I just invite you in the chat box, if you'd like to type in anything that you think might impact those psychological symptoms of menopause, anything at all that you think of, you just like to type it in. So I always find when we look at the practical steps, alcohol, brilliant. Thank you. It's really important to look at, okay, well, where can I start? So alcohol, and I think I saw work and pressure. I saw caffeine there somewhere. I'm thrilled. I think I saw caffeine because most people are afraid to put caffeine up. Did I? Oh no, oh, I did. Yes, caffeine. Brilliant. Tiredness, coffee, lack of sleep, dehydration, sleep loss. Yeah, sleep. See, sleep's a huge one. Sleep, um, and caffeine. Anything else? Social gatherings, exercise, gatherings, weight, bad nutrition. Yeah, so processed foods. So if we just look at these, alcohol will exacerbate. I can safely say all your symptoms of menopause. It's everything in moderation, but be mindful. It will exacerbate brain fog. It will exacerbate anxiety. Will exacerbate your urinary issues. It will impact your sleep. So just be very mindful. Alcohol in moderation. And if you find it is impacting you, then please just even look further at how you can reduce or minimize it. Processed foods are another one. This is a time when what you eat is so important. And this is from everything, from the minute you wake up in the morning to the end of the day. And I know there was quite a few comments earlier in relation to weight management, and weight is it's a big conversation, excuse the pun, but it is when it comes to menopause, because there's no quick fix. There's no magic solution. It takes a 360-degree effort to manage weight in the menopause years. But a really important part is looking at the quality of the food that you are putting into your body. So processed foods, they are not going to nourish your body as much as the simple raw home cooked foods will. So that's really important. And I'll touch on food again in a minute. Sleep is critical, absolutely critical when it comes to our mental health. So it's really important to make sure that you're getting deep restorative sleep. And please remember, a good sleep routine starts the minute you wake up in the morning. That is the really important thing when it comes to sleep. The minute you wake up, it's getting into the brightest lights possible that kicks off the circadian rhythm, and that is starting up your nourishing sleep routine, and you continue nourishing that throughout the day, but the priority is sleep. And also, if we look at caffeine, so caffeine, we all love a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and again, everything in moderation, but just be mindful. Too much caffeine will impact anxiety and brain fog. So be very mindful of that. And ideally you want to be looking at 3 to 4 max a day. If you have any issues whatsoever with sleep, I would suggest no caffeine after 12 o'clock in the day. Work pressure. So stress, it's really important. Like I said at the beginning, acknowledge stress. But what's key here is look for support. Please look for support. I have a very good handout, actually, I'll send to Deirdre later today, and maybe you can share with everybody. And that gives, there's some top tips there in how you can open the conversation with your manager if you'd like to do so at work. Ask for help. Please ask for help, because whatever you're struggling with, there's always going to be practical solutions that can help you. So really important to look at that. And also in your workplace, if you have like the employee assistance program, these facilities can be very beneficial in these years, because when it comes to how we're feeling, it's great to talk to our family, our friends, our partner, but sometimes too, you might just need an independent voice. So, use that service if you can. So reducing the nutrient robbers and just being very conscious now of everything that's going to promote your psychological health is really important. And that's where we come to the 6 M's of menopause. And this is something Now I'm tweaking it for today. I do have, if you look at my book, I have a quite established 6 M's of menopause. But when we look at the psychological, it's similar, but a little bit different. So when we look at that, the first one is the MOT. And this is, as I referred to earlier, please make sure you are keeping on top of your health. Because if you're having a thyroid issue, that might look like low mood, it might look like anxiety. So make sure that, certainly from your early to mid 40s, you get into the habit of an annual check with your doctor, just at a minimum, just to keep on top of your health. Be empowered with your health. And as part of that, you can also then discuss with your doctor, if you need to, what are your medical options? And hopefully you'll have gone through HRT and non-hormonal medications that can support menopause in your previous session. But be empowered in these years, know what your options are. And just one thing I'd like to mention here is antidepressants have a very conflicted history. Have they been overused in menopause? 100% yes, they have. But do they have a role to play in menopause? Yes, they do. And what I am seeing is that it's nearly like antidepressants are being seen as a baddie. But for someone who doesn't respond well to HRT or maybe cannot take HRT, antidepressants can be very effective to help with both the vasomotor symptoms, the hot flushes and night sweats, and also the psychological symptoms of menopause. So just make sure you're working with your doctor with a collaborative, supportive relationship is so important as we go through these years. One other thing just to mention, again, from a medical perspective, be mindful too, there are, when it comes to brain fog in particular, there are some medications that actually can cause brain fog as a symptom. So again, you could just go through that with your doctor and just understand if there's anything there that might be causing some of the symptoms. That's the MOT. The next one is, and we mentioned earlier, food. So it's menu. And this is the time now to really nourish your body. Loads of fruit and vegetables, loads of fiber, keep your body nourished, loads of nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are phytoestrogens. They are foods that mimic the action of estrogen in the body, very different to medical HRT, but they have a role to play. So this is where you really just want to just take pride in nourishing your body with good foods. There is no menopause diet. This is something that can be out there a lot on social media. There is no clinically proven menopause diet. We know from overall health benefits, the Mediterranean diet is the diet that gives optimum benefits that comes to health at all ages. So that's certainly one to look at. And when we look at menu too, please also be aware, I think somebody mentioned dehydration. Hydration is so important. Our brain contains, I think it's 80% water. The brain is brain fog, it is how we're feeling. So it's really important to keep the brain hydrated, keep our body hydrated. So just make sure you're drinking loads of water as well. The next one is movement. And just make sure every day, in whatever form works best for you, just move. If it's a day where you are just feeling a little bit low, even a 5-10 minute walk outdoors, any form of movement, it will just help the body and it will help how you're feeling. But just be mindful too, if you're feeling utterly exhausted, please don't put yourself under pressure. Be gentle with yourself because your body is changing. But what's important is just once you have the information and know what's happening, that you can look to where can you get help? How can you support yourself? Movement being another key part of it, and any form of movement helps when it comes to how we can feel. It's getting the feel good hormones. Aerobic exercise is obviously fantastic, but also weight bearing, strengthening exercise, really good for confidence, but also just very good for how you feel as well. And then another part of it is meaning, and this is really, this is time for you. In Japan, if any of your familiar with Marie Kondo, the decluttering specialist from Japan, she talks about things in your life that spark joy. And that comes from a Japanese phrase called ikigai. And ikigai is about, what's your purpose? What's your passion? What do you love doing? Now, that could be your job. It could be cooking. It could be listening to music. It could be running. It could be abseiling, rock climbing. I don't know, whatever it is. But whatever that is, in the menopause years, perimenopause, all the way through to post, you want to nourish that. Find what that is and do more of it. And that's really important because that's carving out time for you, which will support how you're feeling. And another part of it is minding you. And when we look at this, the menopause years are often described as the sandwich years, and there can be a lot going on. It can be that you've got aging children, aging parents, and then you're in the middle with work, life, and menopause sprinkled on top. That's a lot. So now what you really have to do is just look after yourself, mind yourself, and that is nourishing the meaning, but it's also minding yourself through the lifestyle, prioritizing your sleep, nourishing yourself with good food, making sure that you've got good movement in your daily habits, and let that movement too have some form of relaxation. Mindfulness, meditation, hugely beneficial. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, we know is very beneficial for menopause, primarily for night sweats, hot flushes, sleep issues, and anxiety. It's a very practical, very powerful therapy that can be used. Also, can just be, as I mentioned earlier, one-to-one counseling, but it can be very good to have somebody else to talk to. So it's just minding yourself is very important in these years. And that, as I said, can come from many guises. It might be that discussion with your doctor about what your options are to support yourself, but just be empowered so that you can make your own individual choice. And then the final one is mingle. And this is having support, having your tribe, having those people that you can speak to when you're having a bad day, when you're feeling low, when you're not feeling yourself. Like Lucy, it was her friend who basically just went to her and just said, I'm worried about you. But, bring a tribe around you. Make the effort to go for coffee, even on a day you're feeling vulnerable. If you feel safe to do so, share what you're feeling with trusted friends, with partner, etc. Because the one thing that we need in menopause is support. Support is crucial. So it's really important to bear that in mind. And I'd just like to leave you with menopause is a complex conversation. But if we look to Japan, they've no dictionary term for menopause. They have a term called kanenkai, and that loosely translates as renewal, years, and energy. If you think about that, renewal, years, and energy, now it's a much bigger conversation, but there is a whole opportunity in the menopause transition where we can refocus what we're concentrating on, and we can look through food, look after our mental and emotional health, look after our cardiovascular health and our bone health. Through movement, we do the same thing. So it could be that we are future proofing our body for the years ahead. And that is a really important aspect of menopause. So it isn't, just bear in mind, we don't get all of the symptoms, and they too, like everything, this too shall pass. But the renewal and opportunities of menopause are there. It's all about being empowered to understand how you can support yourself in these years. Thank you. And I think, Deirdre, there's quite a few questions there,
Yeah.
but
I might
we'll go through them.
Thanks, Catherine. Might just come in here just before we do that, and we'll pause before we move to the live questions and answer session, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Catherine, I would like to thank you for such an insightful and informative talk, and really for naming it, I suppose. And, I think it'll have resonated with all of us here today. And we'll get into that in more detail now in a few moments with anybody who'd like to do that. Just for anyone listening to this recording, please keep an eye out for more lunchtime sessions coming up in our menopause awareness series in the coming weeks. And if you've any any feedback on today's session, we would love to hear from you. And if you could email any queries or comments that you'd like to make or suggestions to yourhealthandwellbeing se@hse.ie. Thank you.